Hello, welcome everyone to Foster America's annual virtual summit. We're so glad to have you here. We'll be getting underway in just a few minutes, but as you join us, please use the chat to share with us and the other participants who you are, where you're coming from, geographically, organizationally, and give us your thoughts in a few words or a phrase to an opening question. What does it take for families to truly thrive? I'm so pleased to have so many friends and new and old joining us here today for Foster America's annual summit. And I love reading the responses in the chat. I think that they collectively reveal something really important. Thriving families aren't the result of programs or policies or even organization. These are themes about connection, hope, joy, and love. And I think these are truly the roots from which thriving grows. We're so excited to have you all here today because Foster America is deeply committed to that vision that every family thrives. For us, that means working toward an ultimate goal when children and families experience well being in the context of their homes and in safe and stable communities. And for us, that also means experiencing freedom from any unnecessary and harmful child welfare systems involvement. This year, we're excited to be celebrating the 10th year of Foster America's existence as an organization. And we've been learning and building and partnering toward that vision now for nearly a decade. This network of friends and contributors represented in all those who have joined us here today is such a big part of everything Foster America is and does. Together with all of you, we've tested ideas, we've worked alongside of communities and engaged with public systems in new ways to really deepen and understand how we can truly support families getting what they need and what gets in the way of that. This annual summit has become a bit of a tradition for us, a moment when we invite everyone in our network to take an hour out of their day today and reconnect and hear just a little bit about our work. For some of you, this is maybe a periodic touch point, a chance to get back and reconnect with us or think about child welfare in a way that you don't every day. For others who I see here in the call with us, you're in it with us day to day. And no matter where you may be along that continuum, we welcome you and are so grateful to you all because the work of systems change for families will truly take all of us. As we get ready to dive into the stories of our work told by leaders within the Foster America team, I want to start out by naming one tension and then direct your listening to three things as we go along. First, the tension. One of Foster America's organizational values is generational change. We have this as a value because we know that creating a more just and supportive world for families will not happen in one day, 1 year, or one grant cycle. But for a still relatively young organization, and for humans who long to see an end to the suffering of families today, it can be really hard to keep a long-term view. And that is even more so in a world that's organized around short-term gains and silver bullet solutions. So against that tension, it's pleasing to be able to lift our heads as we reach 10 years and as we pause the day-to-day work and share stories with one another, both about the short-term and the long-term hope and possibilities that we see emerging from our work. So that brings me to the three things that I hope you, our listeners, will keep your ears open for today. First, as our work and our organization is maturing, I'm really pleased to be able to share results, to be talking about good things that are happening on the ground that really start to change the conditions for families. So I hope you'll listen for those, but not as silver bullets or quick fixes. Alongside of those, I want you to listen for two other things. First, I really want you to listen for stories of process. The innovations we're making are not just in what we're doing, but how we're approaching change, and especially how we're engaging those most impacted, those who have lived experience of child welfare in the creation of solutions. And then, third, maybe most of all, I hope you'll listen for stories of relationships. Who's connected? How are they together breaking down barriers? And what does it really take for collaboration to be high quality and effective? I think these might be some of the most important achievements of all. So, I think with no further ado, I'd like us to be able to dive in here together today. A couple of quick notes. One, this is a recorded conversation today. We'll be able to share the webinar back with all of you and those who couldn't join us live. Second, the question and answer function will remain open throughout the conversation today. So please send in your questions along the way. We are going to go through all four of our panelists, and then they'll come out together at the end, and we'll lift up some of the questions and conversation that you all bring forward in the chat for further discussion. We're going to be joined today by four of my colleagues. We'll start in the West Coast with Erin Havig, who's going to share about Grow the Green in Washington State, an effort that unites data with lived experience for prevention planning. Second, we'll be joined by China Phillips, talking about Opportunities for Prevention and Transformation Initiative, a national body of work in which we've joined with sites and organizations across the country to find new ways to respond to early signals of families' needs. Third, we'll go to Colorado, where Angela Lytle will share with us about reimagining and the ways that we're working with 211 and the United Way to see families avoid child welfare systems involvement. And then fourth, Des Thomas will join us to share about our continued work with Changemakers, especially our fiscal leadership circle. All right, so with no further ado, I would love to welcome Erin. Hi, Erin, take it away.
Thank you so much, Marie. It's an honor to be here with everybody today. My name's Erin Havig, and I use she, her pronouns, and I come to you from the great Washington State. And for us, it is still morning. It is 9 for us. Nalini, can you go to the next slide, please? I get to the great opportunity to share with you one of our 9 major areas of work that we have been working on this last year with Washington State DCYF, the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. And we call this effort Grow the Green. So really this effort is about how do we shift and support families with a child welfare prevention and systems innovation initiative to really reduce repeat referrals into the child welfare system and utilize the data that DCYF has such strength in. So as we talk today, you're going to hear a little bit about Grow the Green. And when I say growing that green, you'll see a chart and see how that comes together. But green really represents the families who will experience neither an out-of-home placement, so like foster care or removal from their family, or a re-referral within 180 days after their first initial referral to Child Protective Services. We want to really focus on expanding the number of families who stay safely supported in their communities and don't end up being re-referred or placed out of home. One of the great things that Washington State has is a tremendous data team. They have this group called the Office of Innovation, Alignment, and Accountability within DCYF, and this is a champion network of data expertise, and they really focus in on how do we make solutions, how do we make sure the things that we're offering are doing what we said they would, and they have tremendous tools. One of the barriers that we saw is that those tools aren't being uptaken by the communities in a way that they can access. They have the context and the tools to use that. In partnering in the Grow the Green effort, we partnered with parent leaders to help co-design a learning arc so that parent leaders, community members could feel empowered to use this data. And what we're here to share with you today is really about how do we do that and use these data to drive decisions in the local community. Next slide, please. So what the Office of Innovation, Alignment, and Accountability, called OIAA, within the DCYF system was looking at is the over from 2019 until 2024, they were able to reduce out of home placements by almost 50%. But many of those children returned into the system, and they wanted to stop that from happening. And so that led them to this why of like, why do they keep getting re-referred? And the underlying why was that the conditions that initially brought families into the child welfare system didn't change. So, with those conditions still there, families would get re referred for the same issues over and over again. Next slide. This is what the dashboard looks like, and it will be a live dashboard that is accessible via the internet for any community member. It has different views that you can use. This, again, is a tool developed by Washington State DCYF. This is part of their safe reduction dashboard, and it really gives placement referral and visualization trends. You can filter by race and ethnicity, you can filter by the region, by the type of abuse, and really use that information to try to grow this green area of the chart. When you grow that green, that means that you are preventing children from, again, coming into out of home care or being re referred into the system. There is a caveat of like if the number gets too small, that the data won't be able to be shown. But one of the great things about this is you can look at, did another community figure this out? Is there a way we can learn from that community? And it changes over time. So it's not something we have to submit a new data request to get updated. It's something that exists within the system. So it's not going to require new work to be done each time to create these dashboard filters. So that leads me to the next part of how we approach this. So on our next slide, you'll get to see two of our parent leaders. Washington State DCYF also has a wide network of parent leaders that they partner with. And intentionally, we partnered with two of the parent leaders that are part of the parent advisory group at DCYF, so that we could build this continuous link between that advisory group of parents and this effort. And these parent leaders have been such dynamic resources of helping us design a learning arc that makes the data feel trustworthy, that gives community members, parents, and hopefully local child welfare office participants, if we can get them there, the opportunity to really understand, what does this data mean? One of the initial pieces that we heard is that people were really confused about, what does this little asterisk mean, or this little footnote, and does that mean I can't trust the data? So this learning arc that they have designed really brings their lived experience of being represented in those numbers into how it is used and understood. After we do the learning arc within a community, then we will move into designing and looking at the data, sharing with the community what strategies do we want to try. And then, because we'll be able to have that updated on a regular basis, checking in about, are we making any progress, without having to wait, a year or 2 years to decide if this effort is worth the time and energy. Next slide, please. A couple of the things in the curriculum learning arc are the ability to, how do you use the dashboard? How do you interpret the key questions? How do you connect the data to lived experience and local context? And then really creating a space for people to learn together, understand together, and participate on equal playing field. So it moves us from seeing the data to really understanding it and into using that data for informed decisions. And last slide. So just to reiterate, growing the green really means increasing the number of children who remain safely at home and outside the system over time through partnership at the community level and with our local child welfare leaders. It's a really exciting opportunity. We're just getting started with trying to select our two initial trial communities to see how this works and if it works, and then we'll tweak different elements and hopefully grow this over time. With that, I'll pass it back to Marie.
Thanks, Erin. We really look forward to next year at this time, hearing from you and those two communities, how they've put the data to work and how this curriculum has helped to really share the data with those who are represented inside of it and use it for the best possible planning for families. All right, next up, we'll welcome China Phillips, who will be sharing with us about the Opt-in for Families initiative. Hi, China.
Hi, and thank you so much, Marie. Greetings, everyone. My name is China Phillips. I am a mom of two amazing boys, a wife, a sister, a friend to many, and at Foster America, I have the honor of serving as the Senior Director of Opt-in. Next slide, please. I begin with who I am because I feel like this work asks us to show up as humans first. Systems don't change unless the people within them are willing to see more deeply, feel more honestly, and act more courageously. If we are serious about preventing children from entering the child welfare system, then we must move beyond the surface understanding and sit with the complexities that our families live in every day. Commit to prevention in a real way and examine how systems show up in relationship with the communities that they serve. Too often, our current systems are built on surveillance with intervention triggered after harm is suspected. And in doing so, we miss the chance to stand beside families earlier, to support, to strengthen, and to help them thrive. Next slide. So, launched by the Doris Duke Foundation, Opt-in is an effort to shift away from a punitive removal focused system to one grounded in prevention and well-being. So children and families can experience better outcomes across their lifetime. We know that roughly 37% of children in the US and more than 50% of Black children will experience CPS investigation by the age of 18. Even when necessary, this experience can be deeply frightening and often traumatic. And when we look at the data, like on your screen, we see something important. In 2022, more than half of the calls to CPS were screened out. So, for those of us like not in the weeds often, this means that they did not meet the threshold of investigation. This tells us something profound. Families are reaching systems with some level of need, but not always receiving support. The system is overloaded, yes, but also misaligned with what families are truly asking for. Next slide. So, with co-design as our center, Foster America has the opportunity to work alongside three partner organizations. So, Harvard Government Performance Lab, Chapin Hall, Think of Us. And we're grounded in the belief that those closest to the challenges must shape the solutions. This is not just about system redesign, but it's about reimagining what becomes possible when families are trusted as experts in their own lives. And at its core, this work is about building a future where families have what they need to create the lives that they want and deserve for themselves, leveraging data and community understanding because lived experience is at the table as we build the design. So, next slide. Doris Duke Foundation actually selected four states on your screen. So the amazing Washington, D.C., Oregon, South Carolina, and Kentucky. It's a weird group of folks, but I promise it was intentional. So together, these jurisdictions are testing new approaches, building community-based prevention-oriented systems designed to support families before crisis leads to foster care involvement. This is where vision meets practice, where we begin to see what change can look like in real time. So I'll share a process map on the next slide. So this is what opt-in does. So you heard our why and why we're so passionate about it and the states that we're in, but it builds on the foundation of co-design, like I said, but this model centers four pillars: access, engagement, navigation, and support. This process map reflects how families move through the opt-in program, not as cases to be managed, but as people to be met with care, clarity, and dignity. Once they are screened out, the CPS worker connects them to a family resource center or resource hub in their community, in the family's community, right? And then from there, the navigator learns the family's needs and provides them with concrete resources. While each site adapts the model to its context, this is the shared framework across all jurisdictions. So we're really proud of that. Next slide. So lived experts have been at the table, but what we also know is that 60% of substantiated CPS referrals are for neglect alone. And the strongest predictors of neglect are rooted in financial hardships, food insecurity, housing, utility shutoffs. When we listen to families, their needs tell a richer story, as you can see on your screen here. This is only the beginning, and we're building on our data, but we are so excited that resources are finally on the ground. So we are in the early implementation phase. Like that process map took a lot of work, right? Like that was 2 years of work. But we're finally where we are meeting families. On this next slide, we begin to align support with lived reality and not just systems. What I love about this example is that it truly supports meeting families where they are and not where we expect them to be. So the variation reflects the place-based understanding of rural versus urban and carry different challenges, different strengths, and different needs. Our community leaders have helped us to see this clearly, right? And because of that, the model becomes more responsive, more human-centered. And then on my final slide, I must share with you the beautiful faces behind this work. I think when I first heard about opt-in and jumped to the opportunity to work with Foster America is what makes it unique is that from the very beginning, lived experience is involved in the process, not as an afterthought, not in the final stage, but through the messiness of it all to troubleshoot. They've helped with suggesting language for navigators. They've even helped to train some of the navigators. And they've been a part of emergent needs as we begin into our early implementation. So I'm excited for the conversation and I'll kick it back to you, Marie.
Thanks, China, for that rapid run through the rich work of the last couple of years of opt-in. I know we'll have some questions further when we bring the panel forward for you about all of that. Next up, Angela. Glad to welcome you back, Angela, to share about the Colorado 211 and the work of the Reimagining Committee.
Thank you, Marie. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Colorado for 5 minutes. I'm really, really excited to talk with you about an amazing project that is being led by the Reimagining Colorado Child Welfare Steering Committee, which was launched back in 2022, led primarily initially by the Child Welfare Director at the state level, Joe Humlar. This group is an incredible group of human beings. And while I am now with Casey Family Programs, I had the honor of serving as the Colorado Site Director in supporting and promoting the work that has been led by the Reimagining Steering Committee. And the camaraderie, the connection, the genuine relationships that I have been witness to over the past handful of years, and the impact, therefore, on practice has been incredible. Next slide, please. While there are several projects being led by Reimagining, I'm going to share one in particular that is a really strong example of co-design. Colorado hosts and shares publicly an incredible data source. We use data in this steering committee and matching that with the stories, with the emotional experiences that those around our table have, to then design and launch certain projects with desired outcomes. What the data told us that led to the design of the Warm Line was that in 2025, over 117,000 calls came into the Colorado hotline, referrals of families that others in our community were concerned about. 74% of those calls were screened out, which means that the concerns coming in didn't reach the threshold designed by statute of abuse and neglect. Therefore, they were screened out. Sometimes those families, depending on where those calls came in, could receive a little bit of support intervention, but most of the time, nothing. Families, however, were still recorded as suspected of maltreatment of their child or children. What they truly ended up needing was housing, food, and support, not necessarily report. So what are lived experts in the Reimagining Committee? And that's what's unique about this group is more than half of our members in Reimagining are those with lived experience. They've been impacted by this system, either as a youth and or a parent. The warm line was designed to be an alternative to the hotline. And callers who are calling in concerns, they get to make the choice whether or not they want to go into the hotline or they want a different community response. Through 211, they then have access to over 7,000 services statewide, and a referral doesn't end up made to the child welfare system, which is a really unique and awesome component of this model. So listen carefully as we go through some of the specifics of the model. Next slide, please. So how did this happen? As I said, more than half of our members are lived experts. What they said to us was, we need to change the front door of the child welfare system. So working in partnership, especially with Mile High United Way 211, state leaders, county leaders, community leaders, and other key partners, including the Kemp Center, who is doing our evaluative work, this model was co-designed based off of experience with an overall approach to offer those calling with worries an alternative to just making a report, really offering an alternative to be more supportive to the families and the kids that they're worried about. This is the unique piece. We all hear about these warm lines being launched, right, across our nation. This model so far is the only one we've been able to identify, and it's positioned outside of the child welfare system. That's the key component that makes this different. What is true co-creation and what did we follow with respect to this honoring was we defined how this warm line needs to work in actual practice. Again, led by lived experience, not informed by lived experience, led by experience. This shapes how families and reporters engage with our system. And again, we tried to really, really focus on how do we build a model that's reflective of what we're learning through the data and the stories about what real families need. Next slide, please. How it works. When a caller makes a call to the traditional hotline, no matter where, it'll go through the state, then gets routed out. They are greeted by a new script that says, if you're truly concerned about abuse and neglect, as defined by statute, that's what this is, go ahead, continue to the hotline, push 2. If you're concerned about a family or a child who tends to be or seems to be in need of mental health support, parenting, housing, food, medical care, whatever that might be, consider pushing 1 and be connected to a community navigator at the Mile High United Way 211 for supports, services, and alternatives that then you can offer as caller to the family you're worried about. On the backside of that phone call, if in fact concerns about potential abuse and neglect still exist, they will be warmly connected back to the hotline to actually make a referral. So there's a safety net built inside. What makes this different? What's different is it's built outside the child welfare system. So it bounces off the front door of the hotline if in fact the caller chooses to go to 211. There's no identifying information collected, no names, no birth dates, no addresses, and those who are calling do understand they are truly therefore using a community-based network. There's not a referral captured on the backside, which is often what happens with warm line design. Poverty is not neglect. That 74% I mentioned earlier, most of those calls are due to a defined or a misunderstood definition of what neglect is. Bottom line is, this is the right response for families at the right time and not only going into a default system. One more slide, please. So what are we learning? This pilot, which included 3 counties in Colorado, Boulder, Pueblo, and Gilpin, launched in December of 25. We're running it through the summer of 2025. We are tracking usage and the impacts on the backside through quantitative data and qualitative data. So we'll be doing interviews with those who have used the system. And we're using that data and the stories in order to strengthen the model along the way, building awareness among mandatory reporters and communities so that they'll feel confident in using the warm line, and ultimately fewer families going into the system unnecessarily and supported at a higher level at the community level. And we're hoping to expand statewide post the pilot starting in middle of 2026. So stay tuned. Thanks, Marie.
Thanks so much, Angela. And we'll welcome Des Thomas to share about our Changemakers work and a deeper dive with our Fiscal Leaders Circle. Hi, Des.
Hi,
Des, you.
Marie. Good afternoon. My name is Desiree Thomas. I'm the Vice President of Culture and Capacity Building. I have the honor and privilege of developing and managing our Changemaker programs and supporting our alumni network. I'm excited to share with you our commitment to investing in leaders driving systemic change so that families can thrive and prosper. Next slide, please. Foster America started investing in Changemakers 10 years ago when it started, with our initial fellowship that placed leaders within systems to drive change within the child welfare system. Over the past 3 years, the approach has evolved from placing fellows inside systems to supporting leaders already working across systems and communities through our leadership circles. We have hosted 3 circles: our National Leadership Circle, which supports people with lived experience driving systemic change, our TLC, Technology Leadership Circle, that match people with lived experience with technologists to develop concepts of technological solutions for the child welfare system, and our Fiscal Leadership Circle that centers fiscal leaders and program leaders that want to drive systemic change using fiscal strategies. Today, we have 99 alumni across 23 states and territories, most of whom are working across a variety of sectors, continuing their work to strengthen how families are supported nationwide. Our fellowship pathways, both past and present, have shaped what we understand about how to support leaders working to change systems so that families can thrive. Foster America believes that when we invest in leaders with proximity to challenges, they are best positioned to drive systemic shifts. Today, I will highlight our Fiscal Leadership Circle, our leaders who are committed to taking fiscal approaches both within the private and public sector to move resources upstream toward prevention, reducing the need for system involvement or placement. Our Fiscal Leadership Circle started in 2024. We are proudly in our second cohort, welcoming a class of now 13 fiscal leaders who manage roughly $4 billion, and oversee roughly $4 billion collectively in child welfare resources across 10 jurisdictions. The fellowship is a 12-month journey designed to support fellows that come in an effort to advance prevention-oriented solutions. The objectives of FLC or any of our leadership circles is to develop leaders to drive system change, to advance prevention-oriented solutions, to strengthen cross-sector collaboration. This work cannot be done in siloed ways. Very often it involves creating and weaving funding and working across systems, and to build really a networked ecosystem that will support our leaders beyond the fellowship. Next slide, please. So how FLC works, our fellows come in with real projects, from wanting to expand funding as it relates to family resource centers, or housing solutions for families in order to prevent placement. We have a fellow currently that has an interest in expanding resources for victims of sex trafficking. Each project is focused on unlocking funding to support families before getting involved in the child welfare system. Our learning and expertise comes from four sources. First, technical. We spend time ensuring that our fellows have the technical expertise to navigate complex funding laws and regulations so that they can unlock and maximize funding. Our fellows also learn from our network of fiscal experts and faculty. We have the honor and privilege of having Don Winstead as a faculty member, as an advisor to Foster America. Heather Baker from PCG is support to our fellows and our faculty. We have numerous faculty throughout the system that many of you are aware of, like Miranda Lynch-Smith and Rebecca Jones-Gaston and Alex Briscoe. We are very honored and privileged to have them supporting our fellows in this effort to ensure that families have what they need before getting involved in the child welfare system. Our fellows receive support from Foster America in terms of their project development and their strategy. And we introduce adaptive and relational leadership and storytelling as a tool for our fellows to give them ways to articulate and be able to navigate and shift the system. Lastly, our fellows have access to a leadership ecosystem. And so this is not just a fellowship or a learning experience. We are creating a community, a network, where our fiscal leaders have peer support. They have space to learn from one another, test ideas. But there's also a growing network of advancing professionals that want to increase investments in prevention and believe that families, when adequately supported, will not need to come to the attention of the child welfare system. We've expanded some of our work just in terms of our network and our development of the ecosystem by creating quarterly prevention roundtables that include our fellows, our advisors, our alumni, and we have our alumni network that continues to keep our fellows connected in our work. Next slide, please. Next, I will talk about what FLC looks like in practice, providing an overview of 3 of our fellows projects that increase prevention resources or created conditions that would increase prevention resources within your jurisdiction. The first one is Jennifer Anderson Judkins from DC. What she did was she unlocked funding for motivational interviewing services for families by coordinating their billing infrastructure. That resulted in her unlocking $12 million in funding to support families in a preventative way. This demonstrated that when systems have the right infrastructure, and in this instance, it was claiming infrastructure, along with recognized EBP, that they can maximize access to services and funding for services. Next slide, please. Our next fellow, Dustin Corey, at the time was the Strategic Initiative Supervisor for Wisconsin's Department of Children and Family Services, used Family Keys, a family stabilization program, to unlock resources for families to stabilize housing in an effort to prevent families from unnecessarily entering the system. And he was able to demonstrate that they saved the system $370,000 in placement dollars. So our investment in family stabilization housing supports eliminated the need for $370,000 by supporting 50 kids staying with their families. Next slide, please. And finally, Chris Stoner-Mertz, who was the CEO of California's Alliance for Child and Family Services, she created conditions within her system and her network to ensure that family resource centers had a system in which they could obtain funding and had the technical know-how and coordination to be able to increase funding within their network. And so her intention was to ensure that family resource centers, that's my target. I'm going to make sure that they have access and are able to deploy resources effectively. That created a pathway to unlock $98 million for that network for community-based services for families. Next slide. So what have we learned just in terms of FLC? We know that funding is complex and that without knowledge, without resources, without knowing where to go to access information, without working cross systems, we're not going to get what we want for families, right? And so we're really encouraging and creating learning and the infrastructure so that our fellows know how to navigate, know how to work cross systems in order to maximize prevention dollars for their families within their jurisdictions. We also, through our learning, encourage our fellows to identify system partners that they need to collaborate with and build that into their project development and infrastructure so that they're successful in terms of meeting their project goals. And we believe that through all of these efforts, we're creating conditions where the system and its leaders have time and space to pause, to strategize, and to plan and implement strategies that will better support families. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about how Foster America invests in leaders seeking to ensure that families have what they need to thrive and prosper. And I'll turn this back to Marie for our panel.
Thanks, Des. And I'm welcoming back Erin, Angela, and China, and encouraging the audience to please put your questions into the chat as we'll discuss them with the group in the next few minutes. I want to start with a question that we got from Lakita Kozart. She asks about the process and the heart work it requires for families to trust Foster America enough to share lived experience and to guide the work specifically in opt-in, but the other programs our organization has implemented. Anyone want to weigh in on this one?
Yeah, I could jump in first since opt-in was called out. So hi there, Ms. Cozart. We went to grad school together, so good to see you. Glad you're here. So for that, I will say this, that from the very beginning, Foster America was at the table at the inception of opt-in. And she's going to hate me saying this because she might turn purple or red, but Marie and Foster America's values were very much so in a huge part of why lived experts were thought to be that fifth pillar in the work and co-design, rooted in co-design. So because of that, at the very start of all of the sites, Foster America served with really helping to form who our advisory council will be, and working with jurisdictions to identify some amazing community leaders, and then look at in relationship to not only the question that we wanted to solve, but who do they typically work with? Are there new lived experts who could be at the table And so it had everything to do with our values, the readiness of the jurisdiction as well, and the amazing leaders on the ground. And so I'd love to lift up two amazing names, Justina Shuba, and of course, Dr. Matthew Kaywood, other colleagues who are doing this work at the state level. Thanks.
Hi, this is Erin. One of the things that came to mind immediately was one of the primary researchers on this work in Washington. His name is Doug Kleinman, and the way that he holds data as representing like not just a group of numbers, but this is individual family stories, and each number that we talk about represents that was such a good match for the parent leaders. Being able to pull those together with passionate, eloquent, excited parents who were like, we want this information to be accessible, and building those networks was just a really sweet spot for us to be in to come into that relationship. When you have these components together, we're just bringing them together and supporting, nurturing that connection.
I want to consolidate a couple of related questions that we're getting in the chat. Folks are wondering about the ways that the initiatives each of you work on intersect with other non-child welfare contributors, be that those who are mandated reporters, the domestic violence systems, and specifically keeping those who are survivors of domestic violence out of child welfare systems involvement, as well as things like Head Start. A number of you work closely with sister governmental and other community based organizations in these collaborative efforts. Can anyone speak to some of the other folks who are coming to the table to help in the work of prevention?
I'd love to share a little bit about our work with relation to that, Marie. We have a tendency as the child welfare system to sometimes believe we sort of operate in a vacuum and by ourselves, right? And that mentality, unfortunately, serves as a barrier too often to actually open up our doors, open up our ears and our hearts to hearing how families experience other parts of the holistic system that we live in as humans, right? And child welfare doesn't ever exist alone. There are always community partners and other entities like education, like healthcare, right? And when child welfare takes the time to consider how the other systems could, in fact, partner around supporting families holistically, keeping families and kids safe holistically, and meeting the needs of families in a way that serves as true prevention in a much earlier time in the lives of families, how that could impact the child welfare system so incredibly strongly, right? And as we started to, for instance, build the warm line model, we intentionally had conversations about what do families really need, right? Who sees kids earliest in their lives? It's not typically child welfare. It's the health center, it's education. How do we partner with those other entities to make sure we leave no gaps unfilled as we build capacity at the community and jurisdictional levels to meet the needs of families? So it's nice to be able to sort of let down our defenses, let down our walls, join hands in efforts because we share the same intentions and goals and values on behalf of families that we're here to support.
Yeah. I'll jump in as well. And I love that, Angela, because it really sets the stage for some of the work in opt-in. So for each site, we have advisory councils, and they're made up of over 50%, hopefully, of lived experts, but very intentionally sister agency representatives and as well as community-based organizations representatives. So in South Carolina, and I'm thinking about you, Riley, because I responded to your message about while we didn't place the mandated reporters, it was very intentional to have one of the representatives from community and schools to be a part of the the advisory, because we know they're in there and they could potentially, maybe in the future, get to those who mandated reporters. On the two more examples, in DC, they have a larger advisory council where they really look across 8 wards and bring other connected systems to the table to hear about the work that they're doing, in hopes that there can be some learning across systems. And then the last, Dr. K would be happy, that picture from Kentucky that I shared in one of the pictures was a gathering that they did in Kentucky, where they brought leaders across systems in education. They had a panel to really talk about, in order to do prevention well, we need to have individuals at the table who exist outside of the prevention system, to Angela's point. So I love that. Thanks.
And I would just add, in terms of FLC, we are intentional about the importance of cross-sector collaboration, and we address this in 2 ways. The first way is through our curriculum, and so we ensure that our fellows receive information and learn about other funding streams, so Medicaid, TANF, housing, SNAP. We make sure that they are well aware of how those systems function, so that they know if you collaborate, you can enhance and increase the preventative resources within your jurisdiction. The second thing that we do is we take an individualized approach to our fellows' projects. So depending on what their projects are, we assist them with identifying who are those key collaborators, who should you be partnering with, how should you strategize, how should you influence, how should you create connections so that families have resources that they need, that you can't do this alone, right? So we build that into our curriculum and our ways of practice at FLC.
All right, I'm going to combine a question from Ryan Adams. What does the future hold for Foster America? With a little more pointed question. What would you hope to be back here next year if we have a great year ahead, sharing with this group about how your work has progressed?
In my experience, Foster America has really targeted a unique opportunity to help jurisdictions think outside of sort of that child welfare box, right? By building relationships, connections, confidence, credibility at the community level. True prevention. Oftentimes, and there are some amazing prevention programs built inside the child welfare system, well-intended, certainly impactful, and sadly, too often the first things to go when budgets tighten, right? Prevention goes away because there are so many mandated services and interventions that child welfare is responsible for. So prevention isn't, unfortunately, one of those, primary prevention. So to your question about Foster America's future, what we're trying to build at the community level, shared accountability through relationship, is, in my opinion, something that will stick, will be sustainable, and continue to be accessible to all families at the community level.
Happy to jump in as well. As I mentioned in the brief share, that we're at the beginning stages of this. So we've approached 2 communities. We're working through the state process of reaching out to the child welfare system, and then to the leaders, and then to the regional directors, and then to the direct local offices, to see about, would the 2 sites that we would like to work in be sites that they're willing to let us work in. Our goal is to test that out and see how this goes, learn from that, and then if things are going really well, we want to extend that and pilot that. We also know Washington State has a tremendous, amazing network of parent leaders in so many different fields. And so we're really lucky. One of our parent leaders is doing an internship at another agency called the Alliance in Washington State. And is there a shared opportunity where we can learn about how do we mobilize different connections of existing lived experts across the whole state, and work together to expand that. So I'd love to be able to, bring her back next year and have her share, as well as any other sites that we can share what they're learning and what they're trying. We expect some of the things they try to be, standard evidence-based practice type of modalities, but we also expect some innovation as well. So how do you create that balance? What do we learn? What works well in one community versus another? Hope to share all of that. And then we have 8 other deliverables in Washington, so maybe one of those too.
Rapid fire here. 3 things I hope is true. National average for engagement for programs like opt-in sits somewhere around 20%. 20%. I would love to be able to say we are closer to 50% by next year, right? That would be a stretch, but that would be awesome, right? The next is with our lived experts that they are leaning in a little bit more and leading more of their spaces. And that last one is that the jurisdictional partners are taking more ownership of the work. We're talking about sustainability to some of your questions. And then, of course, they're thinking more deeply about prevention in the long arc. So, yeah.
And I will close by saying that I hope that we continue to invest in leaders who are champions of families, diverse leaders who are champions of families that understand that system structures need to change in order for families to thrive, and that families don't need child welfare system involvement, and that having needs for supports does not equate with abuse, neglect in that way. And so people that have that mindset, people who don't vilify families for not having what they don't have, people who don't vilify risk, and understand that very often vulnerability is created by conditions and have a vision to ameliorate those conditions, we want to invest in those leaders and those diverse leaders, be it fiscal, people with lived experience, people who are ready to roll up their sleeves and make system change, real system change, structural change for families is what I hope for.
Well, and I'll answer this question too as we wrap up today. One, I hope that over the next year and really many more to come, that we're able to do the kind of generational change work that it takes to see systems be different. So I hope we continue and grow the examples and the bodies of work and the network of contributors that you heard just a little bit about today. Second, I hope that we'll have the ability to grow the organization and work with more and new partners and places and change makers over the course of time to come. And then third, I look forward to continuing to find more ways to join our work to that of others inside the network, those who, like us, long for a future in which all families thrive and in which unnecessary and harmful child welfare involvement never needs to happen for families. To that end, I want to close today by just offering a couple of ways that we hope new friends and old may continue to stay involved with us at Foster America. Please make sure you're getting our newsletters, our webinar announcements, are joined with us and our team on LinkedIn and other places so that we can continue to find ways to collaborate. Join us for our series or events. Later this year, we'll be celebrating our 10th anniversary and workshopping the future with the field in Colorado, November 16th to the 18th. We hope many of you will join us in person. Third, please think about applying to be a part of the network if that's right for you, whether in our leadership circles or our open roles. And last, of course, we hope you'll consider being a part of our network of donors and contributors too. We really thank you all for being here with us today for this quick hour and look forward to the work ahead with all of you. Have a great day, everyone.